What can I say? First time that I've ever walked into a pub where I have never in my life seen so many beers. Different beers at that. And the pub is, of course, Paddy Carolyn's. The Glass and Castle is the name of your bar. Why?
Well, two reasons. Castle is my favourite beer, and Charles Glass made it.
This collection of yours, how did it actually all start?
It started on the 1st of April 1974, and I remember the date because it was the final trip of the Reina del Mar to South America. And a couple of my mates who were fellow instructors at Langebaan were on board, and they'd asked me to do an air show over the ship as it departed Cape Town, which I did illegally, and did an aerobatic show over the ship as it sailed out of Cape Town. And they were well treated by the ladies on board the ship, and they decided to reward me, and they brought me back 24 beers and a variety of Bacardi products. And I looked at the beers, realized it was a very colorful arrangement, and decided, that's it, I'm going to collect beers from now.
So it all started there, but tell me, how many beers do you have in this bar since you started this collection?
Probably in the region of about 3,500, but it ebbs and flows because, unfortunately, living in Port Alfred, we've got a small problem called rust, and I've lost about, I would say, between 400 and 600. So it hovers around, so let's say 3,000.
With this collection of beers, there's got to be one which is a lot more unusual than others, or one that's more expensive, or one that's stronger. Can you tell us a bit about that?
The different beer strengths have changed throughout the years. At one stage it was only 12%, and that was a Swiss beer. But then it seemed to have started a bit of a competition between the Germans and the Scottish, strangely enough, the Scottish. And these two breweries started to produce beers that were stronger than the previous one. And I managed to jump in and get one of these things called Sink the Bismarck. And this Sink the Bismarck, if you have a look there, you'll see the name, Sink the Bismarck, and the alcohol strength at the back, which is 41%. Now, what happened was the Germans made a stronger beer than what these guys had, and then these guys made a stronger one than what the Germans had. And for a while, this was the strongest beer. But I ordered it from Scotland, and they sent it to me as yeast samples for analysis, so there was zero value. But the beer cost me 978 Rand to get into my bar. So it's the most expensive beer that I have purchased, but it's also the strongest beer that I have in my collection. Subsequently, what has happened was these guys have made a stronger beer because the Germans made a stronger one. But now the Germans have come back, and now they currently hold the record with 57%.
What about unusual? Have you got anything really unusual in the beer line?
Well, there are a lot of unusual ones. I mean, I have some that have been flavored with, I suppose you could call it dacha. They call it hemp beer just to keep it legal. But the most unusual one was a beer that arrived here completely unexpectedly. It came in a box, and the box that it came in was just simply marked Pub Paddy Carolyn, Port Alfred, South Africa. And there you can see the address on the box itself. And I opened it up, and there was an article from a Swiss newspaper featuring my beer, featuring my pub, by two people that I've never seen in my life before. The person who wrote the article and the person who took the photograph have never been in this house.
That's amazing.
But anyway, what happened was, in all of this packaging, I took out a beer, and there it is there. It was sent to me by a doctor living in Davos in Switzerland. And as I say, he addressed it to Pub Paddy Carolyn, Port Alfred. Somebody added the postcode, somebody added my postbox number, and it arrived, and that's it. So not unusual, but unusual in the way that it got into my pub.
From a collection point of view, is there sort of a situation where these get greater value or higher value that you can obtain from these beers from the original purchase price, like a set or two?
Beer, unfortunately, contains protein, and protein doesn't have a long lifespan. I mean, take us. Now, the lifespan of most beers is probably in the range of a couple of weeks. The longer the lagering process takes, the longer the beer will last. So a beer actually loses its value. But as a collector's piece, it can certainly increase in value. I've got a set of 28 beers up in the top corner there called Simba Lager. Now, it was a set of beers that came out in 1987. And I was able to, because I was up in the bush war at the time, get hold of the catering guy who was in charge of all of the stocks. And we opened cases of beer to find the full set. There's 28 of them, but they weren't packaged in sets. You had to find individual beers in every box. And it took us 1,500 cases before we managed to find the full 28 set. Somebody else cottoned onto the idea and tried to do the same, but he managed to get only 22. So as far as I'm aware, it's the only set that's available. And an American collector has offered me 9,000 US for the 28 cans. So that would make it the most valuable. But there's no ways that I'd sell it to anybody.
Talking about animals on cans, any other beers that you may have with caricatures or characters on them?
Speaking of animals, I've got a collection of dogs as well, all stuck together on the same shelf. And they range from fat dog through to bull mastiff, which has a subtitle, Son of a Bitch. There's a lot of beers that are named after holy people. If you look up to your right, you'll see that I've got a holy Joel, St. Sixtus, standing right next to Judas and Lucifer. So the good guys and the bad guys can get together in a bar.
Paddy, thank you for inviting me to be here today this morning. And breakfast to you, my dear friend. Cheers.